The galactic station Eternal Dawn floated in the darkness of space like a small metal moon. It was home to over 50,000 beings from dozens of different worlds. Some had scales, some had feathers, some had skin that changed color with their mood, and some were human. Tiho wiped the grease from his hands and looked at the old pipe he had just fixed. It was not beautiful work, but it would hold. That was what mattered in his job. Things needed to work. Nobody cared if they looked nice. He was 32 years old, with tired eyes and calloused hands. His dark hair was always messy because he spent most of his time crawling through maintenance tunnels where no one could see him. He wore the gray uniform of the station's maintenance crew, and on his shoulder was a small patch with the Earth symbol. It marked him as human. On this station, that mark meant very little. Humans had joined the galactic community only 40 years ago. To species that had traveled between stars for thousands of years, humans were like children who had just learned to walk. They were tolerated. They were sometimes useful for simple tasks, but they were not respected. Tiho climbed out of the maintenance tunnel and found Yuna waiting for him. She was 28, sharp and quick, with short black hair and eyes that missed nothing. She worked as a communications specialist, but she spent most of her time helping the maintenance crew because nobody else would. "Did you fix it?" she asked. "It will hold for another year," Tiho said. "Maybe two if we are lucky." Yuna shook her head. "We keep patching old systems while they build new ones for the upper levels. It is not fair." Tiho shrugged. "Fair does not matter, we do our job." They walked together through the lower decks of the station. These levels were old and worn. The lights flickered sometimes. The air recyclers made strange sounds, but this was where the human crew worked and lived, far from the shining halls where diplomats and officers walked. There were only 12 humans on the entire station. 5 of them worked in maintenance under Do-yun, the crew chief. He was 50 years old, with gray in his hair and deep lines on his face. He had worked in space for 30 years, and he knew every system on this station better than anyone. When Tiho and Yuna reached the crew room, Do-yun was sitting at the table with a cup of cold coffee. He looked worried. "Sit down," Do-yun said. "I have news." They sat. The other crew members gathered around. There was Jihwan, the youngest at 24, always eager but sometimes careless. There was Sujin, quiet and careful, who handled the electrical systems. And there was Minyu, big and strong, who did the heavy lifting work. "Queen Velara is coming," Do-yun said. The room went silent. Everyone knew that name. Queen Velara ruled the Keth Empire, one of the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy. The Keth were tall beings with pale blue skin and 4 arms. They were proud and cold, and they looked at other species the way humans might look at insects. "Why is she coming here?" Yuna asked. "Peace negotiations," Do-yun said. 3 star systems are fighting over resources. If the war continues, millions will die. The Queen is coming to make peace." "That is good," Jihwan said. "Is it not?" Do-yun's face remained worried. "The station is preparing for her arrival. Every department has been ordered to make everything perfect. Every system must work without any problems. If anything goes wrong while the Queen is here, it will be a disaster." "What do they want us to do?" Tiho asked. Do-yun laughed, but there was no humor in it. "They want us to stay out of sight. The Keth do not like seeing humans. They think we lower the quality of the station, so we are ordered to remain in the lower decks during her visit." Anger flickered in Yuna's eyes. "We maintain half the systems on this station. Without us, this place would fall apart." "I know," Do-yun said. "But what we know and what they believe are different things. We follow orders, we stay quiet, we do our job." The meeting ended and the crew went back to work. But Tiho could not shake the feeling that something was wrong. It was not about the Queen or the orders to hide. It was something else, something he could not name. That night, while the rest of the crew slept, Tiho walked through the old corridors of the lower decks. He often did this when he could not sleep. The station spoke to him in creaks and hums, and he had learned to listen. He stopped near a heavy metal door marked with warning signs. Behind this door was the central life support core, the oldest system on the station. It had been built when Eternal Dawn was first constructed, over 300 years ago. Most engineers did not even know it existed. The newer life support systems handled the upper levels. But this old core kept the lower decks alive, and it also served as a backup for the entire station. Tiho pressed his hand against the door. The metal was warm, too warm. He found an access panel and opened it. Inside, old screens flickered with data that most beings could no longer read. The system used analog technology, built before digital became the standard. Tiho had studied such systems on Earth. His grandfather had been an engineer who worked with machines like this. He had taught Tiho the old ways. What Tiho saw made his heart grow cold. The core was failing. 3 of its main regulators were damaged. The cooling system was working at half power. If nothing was done, the core would overheat and shut down within 72 hours. When that happened, the backup systems would fail. Life support for the entire station would collapse. Thousands would die, including Queen Velara. Tiho ran to find Doyun. He woke the old man and explained what he had found. Doyun's face went pale. "Are you certain?" Doyun asked. "I am certain. We need to report this now." They went to the station's command center. It was late, but officers were still working, preparing for the Queen's arrival. Doyun requested to speak with someone in charge. After a long wait, Commander Ravik came to see them. Ravik was a Keth officer with cold, yellow eyes and 4 arms crossed over his chest. He looked at the 2 humans the way someone might look at dirt on their shoe. "What do you want?" Ravik asked. Tiho explained the problem. He spoke clearly and carefully. He showed the data he had collected. He described exactly what would happen if the core was not repaired. Ravik listened, then he laughed. "You expect me to believe that a human found a problem our advanced diagnostic systems missed. Your kind has been in space for less than half a century. You understand nothing." "The system is old," Tiho said, keeping his voice calm. "It uses technology your diagnostics were not built to read. Please just send someone to check." Ravik waved one of his 4 hands. "I do not have time for human foolishness. The Queen arrives in 3 days. I have real problems to solve. Go back to your tunnels and stay there." He walked away. Doyun put a hand on Tiho's shoulder. "We tried. That is all we can do." But Tiho stood frozen in place, watching Ravik disappear. In 3 days, the Queen would arrive. In 3 days, thousands of beings would be in danger, and no one would listen to the warning of a simple human maintenance worker. He returned to the lower decks, but he did not sleep. He sat in the crew room and thought about what to do. There had to be a way. There had to be someone who would listen. Outside the small window, stars burned in the endless darkness. The station hummed and creaked around him. And somewhere deep below, the old core grew hotter, counting down to disaster. 48 hours remained until Queen Velara's arrival. Tiho had not slept. He had spent the night running tests, checking and rechecking the life support core's readings. Every test gave him the same answer. The core was dying. He tried to report the problem again. He sent messages to the engineering department. He filed emergency reports through the station's computer system. Every message was ignored or deleted. Commander Ravik had made it clear that human concerns were not worth his time. Yuna found Tiho in the morning, sitting alone in the maintenance bay. His eyes were red from lack of sleep. His hands were shaking slightly. "You look terrible," she said. "I cannot make them listen," Tiho said. "In 2 days this station will become a grave, and no one believes me." Yuna sat down beside him. "I believe you. Doyun believes you. The whole crew believes you. We just do not have the power to make others listen." "Then we are useless." No, Yuna said firmly. We are ignored. That is different. Useless people cannot do anything. Ignored people are just waiting for their chance. Tiho looked at her. There was fire in her eyes, the same fire that had kept him going through all the years of being looked down upon. She was right. Being ignored did not mean being powerless. But before he could respond, the alarms began. Red lights flashed across every corridor. Warning sounds echoed through the station. The computer's voice announced the emergency in 6 different languages. Critical failure in Life Support Sector 7. All personnel evacuate lower decks immediately. Tiho jumped to his feet and ran. The corridor outside the life support core was chaos. Keth engineers were shouting at each other, their 4 arms waving in panic. Other species crowded the halls, trying to understand what was happening. Smoke poured from ventilation shafts as overheated systems began to fail. Commander BraHFY stood in the middle of it all, his yellow eyes wide with something Tiho had never expected to see on a Keth face. Fear. What is happening? BraHFY demanded. A Keth engineer ran up to him, holding a data pad. The central life support core is failing, Commander. We cannot stop it. The system does not respond to our commands. Then fix it manually. We cannot. The core uses pre-digital technology. Our engineers were never trained for this. The repair manuals do not exist in our databases. We do not even know what tools to use. BraHFY grabbed the engineer with 2 of his arms. You are telling me that we cannot fix a 300-year-old machine. Commander, the technology is too primitive. Our people stopped using such systems centuries ago. No one alive knows how they work. The temperature in the corridor was rising. Tiho could feel sweat running down his back. If the core failed completely, it would not just stop working. It would explode. The explosion would destroy the lower decks and damage the upper levels. The station would lose atmosphere. Everyone would die. BraHFY released the engineer and turned to address the crowd. We must evacuate the station. Begin emergency protocols immediately. Contact the Queen's ship and tell her to delay her arrival. Commander, another officer shouted. The Queen's ship is already in the system. She will arrive in 6 hours. If we evacuate now, it will be seen as a failure. The peace negotiations will collapse. The war will continue. BraHFY's face twisted with anger and despair. He had no good choices left. Evacuate and let millions die in a war, or stay and let thousands die on the station. Tiho stepped forward. I can fix it, he said. Every head turned toward him. For a moment, the chaos stopped. BraHFY stared at the human as if seeing an insect that had learned to speak. You, BraHFY said, the same human who wasted my time with foolish warnings. Yes, the same human who warned you this would happen. Tiho kept his voice steady. The core uses analog technology. My people still train engineers in these methods. I know how the system works. I can repair it. A Keth scientist stepped forward. Commander, the repair chamber is flooded with radiation. Anyone who enters will receive a lethal dose within minutes. Even if this human knows the systems, he will die before completing the work. Humans can survive higher radiation than most species, Tiho said. Our bodies evolved on a planet with a thin atmosphere. We handle radiation better than you think. BraHFY laughed, but it was a desperate sound. You will die in there, human. No being can work in that chamber for more than an hour. Then I will work faster than an hour. Do-Yun pushed through the crowd. He is not going alone. I will monitor his vitals from outside. Yuna will guide him through the communications system. The rest of our crew will provide tools and support. We know what we are doing. BraHFY looked around at his officers, his engineers, his scientists. None of them met his eyes. None of them had a better plan. None of them were willing to enter the chamber. Fine, BraHFY said at last. The human can try, but when he fails, we evacuate. Tiho did not waste time with words. He gathered his crew and went to work. The preparation took 1 hour. Tiho put on the heaviest radiation suit available, but he knew it would not protect him completely. Yuna set up a communication link so she could talk to him inside the chamber. Doyun prepared the medical station to treat radiation exposure. Jihwen, Sujin, and Minyu gathered every tool they might need. When everything was ready, Tiho stood before the chamber door. The heat coming through the metal was intense. Inside, the broken core waited like a dying heart. Doyun put a hand on his shoulder. "You do not have to do this. We can evacuate with everyone else." "If we evacuate, thousands die in the explosion or in the war that follows," Tiho said. "If I try and fail, the same thing happens. But if I try and succeed, everyone lives. The math is simple." Doyun's eyes were wet. "You are a good man, Tiho, better than they deserve." Tiho smiled. "Just keep the coffee ready. I will need it when I come out." He opened the door and stepped inside. The heat hit him like a wall. Even through the suit, he could feel it pressing against his skin. The radiation meter on his wrist began climbing immediately. Red light filled the chamber, making everything look like it was covered in blood. The core stood in the center of the room, a massive cylinder of metal and crystal that hummed with failing power. Pipes ran in every direction like metal veins. Warning lights flashed on panels that used buttons and switches instead of touch screens. Tiho went to work. His hands moved from memory, guided by training his grandfather had given him when he was young. He removed damaged components and replaced them with parts his crew passed through the airlock. He rewired connections that had corroded over centuries. He adjusted valves by hand, feeling for the right resistance. Hours passed. His radiation meter climbed higher and higher. His suit began to fail in places, letting heat and radiation touch his skin. Blisters formed on his hands, but he kept working. When his legs grew weak, he sat on the floor and worked from there. When his vision blurred, he closed his eyes and worked by touch. Yuna's voice was always in his ear. "Tiho, your radiation levels are critical. You need to come out." "Not yet. The cooling system is almost restored." "Tiho, please." "Almost there, just a little more." 16 hours. Tiho worked for 16 hours straight in conditions that would have killed most beings in one. His body was breaking down. His cells were dying, but his hands never stopped. And then finally the core's hum changed. The red lights turned green. The temperature began to fall. The system stabilized. Tiho collapsed on the floor, too weak to move. The airlock opened, and Doyun rushed in with the medical team. They carried him out of the chamber and into the clean air of the corridor. Yuna was crying. "You did it, you actually did it." Tiho tried to smile, but darkness was pulling at the edges of his vision. "Is everyone safe?" "Everyone is safe. The station is saved." That was all he needed to hear. He closed his eyes and let the darkness take him. When he woke up in the medical bay, he learned that Commander Ravik had already filed his report. According to the official record, Keth engineers had resolved a minor fluctuation in the life support systems. There was no mention of Tiho, no mention of the human crew, no mention of the 16 hours in the radiation chamber. Their work had been erased, their sacrifice had been forgotten. But they were alive, and so was everyone else on the station. For now, that would have to be enough. The medical bay was quiet. Tiho lay on the bed with tubes connected to his arms, pumping medicine into his blood. The doctors said he would live, but his body had been badly damaged by the radiation. It would take months to fully recover. Yuna sat beside him, refusing to leave. She had been there since they brought him out of the chamber, sleeping in a chair and eating meals from the hospital food dispenser. Doyun came to visit twice a day, bringing news from the outside world. "The Queen's ship has docked," Doyun said on the third day. "The whole station is going crazy with preparation. I have never seen so many flowers and banners in my life." Tiho tried to sit up, but pain shot through his chest. What about the core? Is it holding? It is perfect. You did excellent work. The system is running better than it has in 50 years. Doyun paused, his face growing dark. Of course, according to the official reports, Keth engineers fixed everything. Your name appears nowhere. I do not care about credit, Tiho said. I care about people being safe. I know, that is what makes you different from them. Later that day, the human crew was given their orders. They were to remain in the lower decks during the Queen's entire visit. No human was to be seen in the upper levels. No human was to interact with any member of the Queen's delegation. They were, in effect, to pretend they did not exist. Yuna's anger burned hot. We saved this station. Tiho almost died, and now they want us to hide like rats in the walls. We follow orders, Doyun said, though his voice was tired. Fighting them will only make things worse for us. So they hid. While the station celebrated Queen Velara's arrival, the human crew stayed in their quarters, watching events on small screens that showed feeds from the upper levels. Queen Velara was unlike anything Tiho had expected. He had imagined her as cold and distant, like Commander Ravik, but she moved through the station with sharp eyes that seemed to see everything. She asked questions that officers struggled to answer. She touched walls and examined equipment as if she were inspecting a ship before buying it. She was not just a queen, she was an investigator. She is smart, Yuna said, watching the screen. Look at how she studies everything. She does not trust what they tell her. Tiho watched in silence. His body was weak, but his mind was working. Something was going to happen. He could feel it. On the second day of the Queen's visit, her inspection brought her to the life support systems. She walked through the newer facilities on the upper levels, nodding at the clean machines and efficient designs. But then she asked a question that made Commander Ravik's face go pale. What is below? She asked, pointing at the floor. Your station design shows additional systems in the lower sections. I wish to see them. Those are old systems, Your Majesty, Ravik said quickly. They are not worth your attention, just backup equipment that is rarely used. Velara's eyes narrowed. Backup equipment that keeps 5,000 beings alive in the lower decks. Backup equipment that serves as emergency life support for the entire station. That seems quite important to me. Ravik had no choice. He led the Queen to the lower levels. When Velara entered the corridor outside the life support core, she stopped. Her 4 hands touched the walls, feeling the metal. Her nose twitched, smelling the air. Then she looked at Commander Ravik with an expression that made him take a step backward. This area was flooded with radiation recently, she said. It was not a question. There was a minor incident, Your Majesty. Our engineers. Your engineers did not repair this system. Velara walked to the chamber door and opened it. Inside, the core hummed peacefully, its lights glowing green. But she was not looking at the working machine. She was looking at the floor. Scorch marks from Tiho's boots, bloodstains where his blisters had broken open, tool marks on panels that showed manual repair techniques no Keth engineer would use. Velara turned to her own technicians who had come with her delegation. Analyze this chamber. Tell me what happened here. The technicians went to work while Ravik stood frozen, his yellow skin turning slightly gray. For an hour, Velara waited in silence as her people examined every surface, every tool mark, every repair. Finally, the lead technician approached the Queen and spoke in a low voice. Your Majesty, this core was hours from catastrophic failure. The damage would have destroyed the lower decks and severely damaged the upper levels. The explosion would have killed everyone on the station, including you upon your arrival. Velara's face remained calm, but her eyes burned. And the repair. Exceptional work, Your Majesty. The techniques used are centuries old, from before the digital era. No Keth engineer has been trained in such methods for 300 years. The radiation levels during the repair would have been lethal for any of our people within minutes. How long did the repair take? The technician checked his data. Based on the wear patterns and residue analysis, approximately 16 hours. 16 hours, in lethal radiation, using techniques that no one else on the station knew. Velara turned to BraHFY. Her voice was soft, but it carried the weight of mountains. Commander, your official report states that Keth engineers resolved a minor fluctuation in the life support systems. Would you care to explain the difference between your report and what my technicians have found? BraHFY's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. I thought not. Velara stepped closer to him. I will ask you one question, Commander. If you lie to me, I will know who performed this repair. BraHFY's eyes darted around the corridor looking for escape, finding none. His proud shoulders slumped in defeat. A human, Your Majesty. A maintenance worker from the lower decks. A human. Velara repeated the word slowly as if tasting it. A human saved my life. A human saved this entire station, and you hid this truth from me. Why? I believed it would be embarrassing, Your Majesty, to admit that our advanced systems failed and that a primitive species had to save us. I was trying to protect the honor of the Keth. Velara's laugh was cold and sharp. You were trying to protect your own honor, Commander. The honor of the Keth is in telling the truth, not in lies and cover-ups. She turned to her guards. Find this human. Bring him to the Grand Hall tomorrow when I address the diplomatic assembly. I will speak with him myself. BraHFY looked like he wanted to disappear. Your Majesty, the human is recovering in the medical bay. He suffered severe radiation exposure during the repair. Then bring his medical bed to the Grand Hall. I do not care how it is done. I will meet the being who saved my life, and I will do it before all the delegates of this station. With that, Queen Velara walked away, her robes flowing behind her like water. BraHFY remained in the corridor, his face gray with fear and shame. In the medical bay, Yuna burst through the door with news. Tiho, wake up. Tiho opened his eyes slowly. What is happening? The Queen knows. She knows everything. She is demanding to meet you. Tomorrow in front of everyone. Tiho stared at her. That is impossible. How could she know? She is not stupid like the others. She investigated. She found the truth. Yuna was shaking with excitement and fear. Tiho, the Queen wants to meet you. The Queen of the Keth Empire wants to thank a human. Tiho laid his head back on the pillow and looked at the ceiling. His body hurt. His hands were wrapped in bandages. He could barely walk. But tomorrow, he would stand before the most powerful leader in the galaxy. Tomorrow, the truth would finally be told. He was not sure if that was a good thing or a bad thing, but either way, he was ready. The Grand Hall of Eternal Dawn was the most beautiful room Tiho had ever seen. High ceilings rose above him like the inside of a cathedral. Crystal lights hung from invisible chains, filling the space with soft golden light. Thousands of beings from dozens of species filled the seats that surrounded the central platform. Tiho stood at the back of the hall, leaning on Yuna for support. His legs were weak, and every step sent pain through his body. The doctors had not wanted him to leave the medical bay, but Queen Velara's orders were absolute. So they had given him medicine to keep him standing and wrapped his burned hands in fresh bandages. The human crew stood around him like a protective wall. Doyun was on his right, ready to catch him if he fell. Jiwin, Sujin, and Minyu stood behind him, their faces nervous but proud. They were the only humans in the entire hall. Can you do this? Yuna whispered. I have to, Tiho said. I have no choice. On the central platform, the ceremony had already begun. Diplomats from warring systems were signing treaties. Officers were receiving medals. Commander BraHFY stood among the honored guests, his face carefully blank, but his eyes kept darting toward the back of the hall where the humans waited. And at the center of it all sat Queen Velara. She was taller than Tiho had expected, even sitting down. Her blue skin seemed to glow in the crystal light. Her 4 arms rested on the sides of her throne, perfectly still. Her yellow eyes watched everything, missing nothing. When the official ceremonies finished, the hall grew quiet. Everyone expected the queen to make a closing speech and dismiss the assembly. Instead, she rose from her throne and walked to the edge of the platform. "Before we conclude," she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the hall, "there is a matter I must address." The crowd murmured in confusion. This was not part of the planned ceremony. Velara continued. 3 days ago, this station nearly died. The Central Life Support Core, an ancient system that serves as backup for the entire station, came within hours of catastrophic failure. Had it exploded, everyone in this hall would be dead. I would be dead. The peace we have just signed would never have happened. The murmuring grew louder. Many in the crowd had not known about the crisis. The official report filed by Commander BraHFY states that Keth engineers resolved a minor fluctuation. Velara's voice hardened. "That report is a lie." Gasps filled the hall. BraHFY's face went gray. "The truth is far more interesting." Velara turned to face the crowd fully. The core was failing because it uses pre-digital technology that no Keth engineer understood. The repair required entering a chamber flooded with lethal radiation. No Keth was willing to attempt it. No other species volunteered. We faced evacuation, the collapse of peace negotiations, and the death of millions in continued war. She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. But someone did step forward. Someone entered that chamber and worked for 16 hours in conditions that would have killed any of my people in minutes. Someone saved this station and everyone on it. Velara's eyes swept across the crowd, finally stopping at the back of the hall where the humans stood. "I will know who performed this repair. Step forward." The hall fell absolutely silent. Thousands of eyes turned toward the back. Tiho felt his heart pounding in his chest. Nobody moved. Commander BraHFY stood among the officers, his face frozen. The Keth engineers who had filed false reports looked at the floor. The entire weight of the hall's attention pressed down on everyone, but no one spoke. Then a small voice broke the silence. It came from the side of the hall where the junior staff stood. It was the human. The crowd turned. A young Keth woman stepped forward, trembling but determined. She was Nira, a technician who worked in the lower levels. Tiho had seen her watching from a distance during the crisis, but he had never spoken to her. "I saw it," Nira said, her voice growing stronger. "I watched him enter the chamber. I watched him work through the night. I saw his crew supporting him, bringing tools, monitoring his condition. The human saved us all." The crowd's attention shifted back to the humans at the rear of the hall. Tiho felt Doyun's hand on his shoulder, steadying him. "Go," Doyun whispered. "This is your moment." Tiho stepped forward. The walk to the platform was the longest of his life. His legs shook with each step. His lungs burned. The eyes of thousands pressed against him like physical weight. But he kept walking, one step at a time, until he stood at the base of the platform, looking up at Queen Velara. She looked down at him with an expression he could not read. Her yellow eyes studied his face, his bandaged hands, his worn uniform with the earth patch on the shoulder. "You are the one?" she asked. "I am, Your Majesty." Tiho's voice came out rough and tired but clear. "My name is Tiho. I work in maintenance on the lower decks." "Maintenance," Velara repeated the word. "You are not an engineer, not a scientist." "No, Your Majesty. I repair things that break. I fix pipes and wires. I keep the old systems running because no one else knows how." "And yet you understood the core when my finest engineers did not." Tiho nodded slowly. "The core uses technology from before the digital era. My grandfather was an engineer on Earth. He taught me how to work with such systems. On my world, we still train people in the old ways. We believe that all knowledge has value, even knowledge that seems outdated. Velara's eyes narrowed. You entered a chamber that would have killed any of my people. The radiation levels were lethal. You worked for 16 hours in those conditions. How is that possible? Humans evolved on a planet with a thin atmosphere. Our bodies handle radiation differently than yours. It still hurts us, but we can survive exposure that would kill other species quickly. Tiho lifted his bandaged hands. I will recover. It will take time, but I will live. And why did you do it? Velara stepped closer, her voice dropping low. My people laughed at you. They dismissed your warnings. They called you primitive and foolish. And then, when the crisis came, they expected you to hide while they found a solution. Why did you step forward when they had given you every reason to stay silent? The hall was completely still. Every being in the room was listening. Tiho thought about the question. He thought about his grandfather, who had taught him that a good engineer fixes what is broken, no matter who broke it. He thought about his crew, who had supported him without hesitation. He thought about the 5,000 beings in the lower decks who would have died if he had stayed silent. Because someone had to, he said finally, and I could. Velara stared at him for a long moment. Then something changed in her face. The cold mask of royal authority cracked, revealing something warmer beneath. Because someone had to, she repeated softly, and you could. She turned to face the crowd, her voice rising once more. Look at this human. Look at his burned hands and his tired eyes. Look at the uniform he wears, marked with the symbol of a world you dismiss as primitive. This being, whom you would not trust to clean your floors, saved every life on this station. He did it without hope of reward, without expectation of gratitude, simply because it was the right thing to do. She pointed at Commander Ravik. And this officer, whom you trusted and honored, lied to cover up his own failure. He dismissed warnings that could have saved us all. He buried the truth to protect his pride. Ravik looked like he wanted to sink into the floor and disappear. Velara's voice softened. I have ruled the Keth Empire for 40 years. In that time, I have learned one truth above all others. True strength is not measured by technology or age or power. True strength is measured by what a being will do when no one is watching, when there is no reward, when the cost is high and the outcome is uncertain. She turned back to Tiho. By that measure, you are stronger than anyone in this hall. Tiho did not know what to say. His eyes burned with tears he was too tired to cry. Behind him, he heard Yuna sobbing quietly. Even Doyun, who never showed emotion, was wiping his eyes. Velara extended one of her 4 hands toward him. Rise, Tiho of Earth. You have earned more than my gratitude. You have earned my respect. Tiho took her hand and climbed onto the platform. His legs nearly gave out, but he forced himself to stand straight. He stood beside the Queen of the Keth Empire, a simple maintenance worker from the lower decks, and for the first time in his life, he did not feel small. He felt like exactly what he was, a human who had done what needed to be done, simply because he could. The Grand Hall remained silent as Queen Velara held Tiho's hand on the platform. Thousands of beings watched, their minds struggling to understand what they were seeing. A human stood beside the most powerful ruler in the galaxy, not as a servant, not as a prisoner, but as an equal. Velara released his hand and turned to address the assembly once more. What I am about to do has never been done before in the history of the Keth Empire, but today calls for actions without precedent. She gestured to her guards. Commander Ravik stepped forward. Ravik walked to the platform with the stiff movements of a man walking to his execution. His yellow skin had gone completely gray. His 4 hands trembled at his sides. You filed false reports about a crisis that threatened this station. You dismissed warnings from capable engineers because of their species. You valued your pride over the lives of thousands. Velara's voice was cold as winter ice. You are stripped of your rank and your honors. You will return to the homeworld to face judgment for your failures." Guards took Ravik by the arms and led him away. He did not resist. He did not look back. His career was over, destroyed by his own arrogance. Velara then turned to Nira, the young technician who had spoken the truth. "You showed courage when courage was difficult. You spoke the truth when silence would have been easier. I will remember your name, Nira of House Telen." Nira bowed deeply, her face glowing with pride and relief. Finally, Velara faced the crowd. "For 40 years, I have watched the galaxy dismiss humanity as primitives, newcomers, children playing at being adults. We measure species by the age of their civilizations, by the power of their weapons, by the complexity of their technology. By these measures, humans seem insignificant." She paused, letting her words sink into the silence. "But these measures are wrong. They measure what a species has, not what a species is. They count achievements instead of character. They value comfort instead of courage." She gestured toward Tiho, who stood beside her, exhausted but unbroken. "Look at this human. He comes from a world that has traveled the stars for less than 50 years. His technology is simple. His people are few. By our measurements, he should be beneath our notice." Her voice rose with power. "But when disaster came, it was not our ancient wisdom that saved us. It was not our advanced machines. It was not our proud warriors or brilliant scientists. It was this human, with his simple tools and his grandfather's knowledge, who entered a death chamber and worked through the night while we stood paralyzed by our own fear." She turned to face every section of the hall, making sure all species could see her clearly. "The Keth Empire has existed for 9,000 years. In that time, we have conquered worlds and built wonders that younger species cannot imagine. But we have also grown cautious. We calculate risks before acting. We weigh costs before choosing. We have become so afraid of losing what we have that we have forgotten how to be brave." She looked at Tiho again, and something like affection crossed her face. "Humans have not learned these fears. They are young enough to still believe that action matters more than safety. They are foolish enough to enter death chambers because someone has to. They are brave enough to speak truth to power when silence would protect them." Velara raised her voice to fill every corner of the grand hall. "This is what humanity brings to the galaxy. Not technology, not power, not ancient wisdom. They bring something we have lost. They bring the courage to act when action seems impossible. They bring the willingness to sacrifice when sacrifice seems foolish. They bring the simple, beautiful belief that doing the right thing is more important than surviving." She placed her hand on Tiho's shoulder. "Tiho of Earth, I offer you a position in my personal engineering corps. You would serve at my side, solving problems that no one else can solve. You would be honored throughout the Empire. Your name would be remembered for generations." The crowd murmured in amazement. Such an offer had never been extended to anyone outside the Keth species. It was the highest honor imaginable. Tiho looked at the queen. Then he looked at his crew standing at the back of the hall. Yuna was crying openly now. Doyun was standing straight and proud. Jihwin, Sujin, and Minyu were watching with wide eyes. "His family, his people." "Your Majesty," Tiho said, his voice rough but steady, "I am deeply honored by your offer, but I must decline." Gasps filled the hall, someone declining an offer from the queen. Velara's eyes narrowed, but she did not seem angry. "Why?" "Because my place is with my crew. They supported me through the repair. They risked their careers to help me. They stayed by my side when everyone else wanted us to disappear." Tiho turned to look at the humans in the back of the hall. "I will not leave them. We came to this station together and we will stay together." Velara studied his face for a long moment. Then she smiled, and it was a real smile, not the cold political expression she usually wore. "Loyalty," she said softly, "another thing humans have not forgotten." She raised her voice again. Very well, Tiho, I will not take you from your crew, but I will ask something else of you. A request, not a command. Ask your majesty. The humans on this station have been treated as inferior. They have been hidden from view and denied recognition for their work. I wish to change this. Velara turned to the crowd. From this day forward, humans on Eternal Dawn will receive full recognition and equal standing. They will not be hidden during diplomatic visits. They will not be dismissed because of their species. They will be treated with the respect they have earned. The crowd murmured, some in approval, some in discomfort. Change was difficult, even change that was obviously right. Velara continued. Furthermore, I ask that the humans share their knowledge of old engineering techniques with those who wish to learn. The skills that saved this station should not be forgotten. They should be taught to others, so that, when the next crisis comes, more beings will be capable of rising to meet it. She looked at Tiho. Will you do this? Tiho thought of his grandfather, teaching him in a workshop filled with old machines. He thought of the knowledge passed down through generations, knowledge that people called outdated and useless. I will, Your Majesty. My crew and I will teach anyone who wishes to learn. Velara nodded, satisfied. Then let it be done. The ceremony ended soon after. Tiho was helped down from the platform by his crew, his legs finally giving out completely. They carried him back to the medical bay, where the doctors scolded everyone for keeping him on his feet so long. But as Tiho lay in his bed, surrounded by his crew, he felt something he had not felt in years: peace. In the weeks that followed, everything changed. Young aliens from a dozen species came to the lower decks, asking to learn the old techniques. Jihwin became their first teacher, showing them how to work with their hands instead of just their computers. Sujin taught electrical repair methods that predated digital systems. Minyu demonstrated the physical strength and endurance that humans brought to difficult jobs. Doyun was appointed official advisor to the station's engineering council, a position no human had ever held. Yuna was promoted to head of interdepartmental communications, bridging the gap between species who had barely spoken before. And Tiho, once he recovered enough to walk again, returned to the lower decks. But now when he walked through the corridors, beings of all species stopped to greet him. Some bowed, some simply nodded with respect. A few, mostly young ones, asked to shake his hand. One day, Tiho found himself standing outside the life support core. A small plaque had been mounted on the wall beside the door. It was made of simple metal, not crystal or gold, and it bore a single line of text in 6 languages. Repaired by human hands, when all others turned away. Yuna found him there, staring at the plaque. "Are you all right?" she asked. Tiho nodded slowly. "I was thinking about my grandfather. He always said that the measure of an engineer is not the machines they build, but the problems they solve when no one else can. I think he would be proud." Yuna took his hand. "He would be, we all are." They stood together in the quiet corridor, 2 humans on a station full of beings who had once dismissed them. The lights flickered slightly, as they always did in the old sections. The air recyclers hummed with their familiar song. Everything was the same, and everything was different. Because now, when beings thought of humans, they did not think of primitives or children. They thought of Tiho, standing before the Queen, speaking 2 simple truths that had changed everything. Because someone had to, and I could. Those words would echo through the galaxy for generations. They would be taught in schools and spoken in speeches. They would become a symbol of what it meant to be human. Not the strongest, not the oldest, not the most advanced. Just brave enough to act when action was needed, and humble enough to do the right thing without expecting reward. That was the worth of humanity, and on Eternal Dawn, at least, it would never be forgotten again.